Good evening. My name is Regina Gallardo. I'm a senior from Mexico City studying art history and Latin American studies. It is my pleasure to welcome to the Davis Museum virtual presentation by artist, curator, and critic and editor America Meredith, organized in conjunction with the exhibition Lisa Rejana in Pursuit of Venus, Infected, on view through December 18. Please note that the Davis will close on December 19 for renovations and will reopen in February 2024 with the career survey of Wellesley alumni artist Lorraine O'Grady, class of 1955. Lorraine O'Grady's both and. I hope that you will visit this fall. We will begin with a native land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Davis Museum at Wellesley College is built on ancestral and traditional land of the Massachusetts people. We also recognize that the United States approval, removal, termination, and assimilation policies and practices resulted in the forced settlement of indigenous land and the attempted erasure of indigenous cultures and languages. We further acknowledge the oppression, injustices, and discrimination that indigenous people have endured, and that there is much work to be done in the important journey of reconciliation. We commit to strengthen our understanding of the history of contemporary lives of indigenous peoples and to steward this land. We further recognize the many indigenous people living here today, including the Massachusetts, Wampanoag, and Nipmuc nations, who have rich ancestral histories in Wellesley and its surrounding communities. Today, their descendants reminds us that they're still here where they maintain a vital and visible presence. We honor and respect the enduring relationship between these people and this land, as well as the strength of indigenous culture and knowledge, the continued existence of tribal sovereignty, and the principle of tribal self-determination. To participate in this program, please note that this event is being recorded and will be made available online in the coming days. We're using a webinar format, and your microphone and video have been turned off during the presentation. Throughout the event, you can use a Q&A box to enter your questions. Live captioning is provided through our Zoom webinar. You can turn it on and off with the closed captions button at the features bar, which is at the bottom of your screen. Now, I'm pleased to introduce and welcome Dr. Lisa Fishman, Ruth Gordon Shapiro, class of 1937, director of the Davis Museum, who will introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you so much, Regina Gallardo, for your so ably introducing our event this evening, and media specialist at the Davis, Serena Conreddy, for her work at the back end in organizing this webinar. Let me also reiterate a warm invitation to visit this fall. Maori artist Lisa Rejana's visually stunning and conceptually provocative digital panorama, In Pursuit of Venus Infected, is based on a fashionable 19th century French scenic wallpaper, Les Sauvages de la Mer Pacifique, that capitalized on popular fascination with the voyages of Captain James Cook and other European explorers to the South Pacific. Rejana destabilizes the dominant historical narrative of encounter, centering indigenous people as agents rather than subjects, privileging native realities, experiences, and points of view. The critique embedded in the work is political, aesthetic, technological, and historical, rendered through a decolonial lens. The exhibition and related programs, including this webinar, are generously supported by the Mildred Cooper Glimcher Class of 1961 Endowed Fund, the Davis World Cultures Fund, the Davis Museum Endowed Fund for International Cultural Programs, and Wellesley College Friends of Art. This evening with America Meredith expands our understanding of Indigenous making in all of its complexity. Meredith is enrolled in the Cherokee Nation and is based in Norman, Oklahoma. She is the publishing editor of First American Art Magazine and an arts writer, critic, visual artist, and independent curator, whose curatorial practice spans 29 years. She earned her MFA degree from the San Francisco Art Institute and her BFA from the University of Oklahoma, and taught Native American art history at the Institute of American Indian Arts, Santa Fe Community College, and the Cherokee Humanities Course. Northeastern State University named Meredith its 2018 Sequoia Fellow. Meredith serves on the Cherokee Arts and Humanities Council Board and the Collections and Acquisitions Committee of the First Americans Museum Foundation. My thanks to America Meredith for speaking with us and to all of you who are joining. This program and the three previous programs in our fall webinar series featuring author Christina Thompson, historian Philip J. Deloria, and a conversation between artists Lisa Rehana and Brooke Andrew will be available on YouTube soon. Join me in welcoming America Meredith.
Should I pop up? Does it go?
It's a go.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Lisa and Rihanna, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for this opportunity to speak today. I don't know if you feel comfortable interjecting, but I certainly welcome if anything needs to be clarified. So I am going to go to screen share. Yay. And this will take 5 seconds. Let's see, yes. Yeah, so thank you. I'm going to start with a little introduction of, where I came from, and then go into my favorite subject in the world, which is First American Art Magazine, which is what I spend all waking hours doing these days, my baby. And I'm coming to you from Norman, Oklahoma, which is the ancestral homelands of the Wichita and affiliated tribes. And I like to show this painting. All my degrees and all my studies are in art, like making art, studio arts. So it's kind of interesting that I, was kind of switch gears and no longer do that, but I definitely talk through a visual language a lot. So this is a rare self-portrait. It's based on photographs. These after my father died in 2003, we found old black and white negatives undeveloped that I was able to develop, and they were all different pictures from Medicine Springs, which is a dance ground outside of Gore, Oklahoma. It's Nachi and Cherokee, and I was amazed the photos were able to develop. So I painted this, and it just shows kind of my family a little bit and where I come from. This is my sister Simonia. So I'm very fortunate. I'm a thin blood. Some people don't like that term, but I like it because I feel that that's me, and I don't want to ever misrepresent myself. So I am Cherokee, and I have the good fortune of being raised with many aspects of Cherokee culture. So we did grow up very close to the Cherokee Nation, and we were able to stomp dance and participate in Cherokee ways. And this is Archie Sam, who's a Nachi Cherokee medicine man and ceremonial leader for this ground that has been put to sleep. And I know the Nachi people are trying to buy this land and bring it back. And then Cherokee people, I think everyone knows the word Cherokee, but the general public doesn't really know a lot about Cherokee culture and who we are as a people. Thankfully, it's unbelievable how much good information is coming out. And part of that is due to OCO TV that is run by the Cherokee Nation. But if you're ever curious about tribes, go to their websites. It's absolutely free information made by Native people. So it's an incredible resource. But for Cherokee people and for the Cherokee Nation, we were relocated from our homelands in Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. So, definitely when you take people away from where their stories are and their histories are, you definitely change them, but we still have retained a lot. And something we've retained is portrayed in this painting that is of my friends when they got married. They had a stomp dance, and it began with the friendship dance. So a lot of our songs, there are cultural exchanges with Muskogee Creek and other tribes. And in pre-contact times, that's how all tribes were, that we interacted with each other. We pushed and pulled from each other. But yeah, so we do share, but we still have this one song, and it is completely Cherokee, and it's one of the first songs Creator ever gave to us. So the fact that we still have that is, just a good reminder of how much we've retained. And like I said, I was trained as an artist, and one of my questions was, to myself in creating art as an undergrad, I was like, what is the most Cherokee essence of painting? What is the most Cherokee visual? And our Celebrate that was developed by Sequoia that just last year celebrated its 200th anniversary of him and his daughter presenting it to the Cherokee Council and it being adopted by the tribe, being used very quickly. So when people see this writing, which is incidentally on all your cell phones and all your smart devices and all your computers, they come with the Cherokee Celebrate. So Cherokee Native speakers actually text each other in Cherokee today. So this is our language. And I think if you think of one symbol that absolutely is Cherokee, it's our writing system. And then we have records of Cherokee women from the 1700s, written records of people weaving textiles from mulberry bast, the interior bark of the mulberry plant, and then painting images, so birds and animals and humans and all these forms. They painted on it, but none of these physical items actually remain. There is painting on walls and painting on fragments of clay ceramics, so that exists, but we really don't have a good record of what our painting looked like. So I was trying to think of what do we not share, because Southeastern tribes share many different cultural traits among each other, but I was like, what is unique to us? And it's our medicinal formula. So these are spoken incantations that might also use medicine, plants and such. And they're beautifully poetic, and there's thousands of them, and they're us. Other tribes have their own, but we have ours. And I've asked elders, if this is okay to paint. And luckily the imagery is really wonderful, but there's no way you could ever look at these paintings and reconstruct what the words are. So yeah, I think Native art, it is generationally how we communicate, one generation to the other is through the visual arts. But a good, amazing thing about it is there's a lot of information that isn't to the uninitiated, or it's not to, the public. But the good thing is the art can portray this, and the public kind of doesn't get the specialized information that it's not supposed to get. So I think generally Native art is a wonderful filter to convey aspects of our culture, and then kind of protect what isn't really for the public. So there are, like I said, thousands of incantations. So I picked the most G-rated innocent ones possible. So these crawdad imagery is about making water boil quickly, which anyone could use. Or and then one of the toads is actually, it was purchased by my tribe, which I'm really honored by, and it has our flag that's bright orange and designed by a Navajo graphic artist. And it was our old courthouse when it was still active, the Judicial Appeals Tribunal. And it's about getting someone off a minor criminal case, getting them off, declared innocent. So maybe a misdemeanor case. And court systems, we have been very active in court systems even before contact. And we've definitely used the courts as a way to assert our rights and recover lost rights. And this is a more recent piece in this series. And it is one of my students who's Eastern Band Cherokee and African-American descent. And I really wanted to portray, and this is a theme throughout all my work, is the real is so much more interesting than the stereotype. Like the real Native people are so more fascinating than any stereotype. And so in Santa Fe, there weren't actually tons of Cherokee people. So I ended up painting several of the same models, but I let models, just dress how they dress, because it's really important to portray images of people immersed and knowledgeable about their own culture, but not conforming to any outsider's expectations. And that again is a theme you'll see throughout all my work, from my artwork into my writing and curation. So one of my more successful pieces that you can see, I continued this for 4 years, was a Cherokee spoke card. So I was a bike messenger, which is how I accumulated many of my scars. Scars are the beauty mark of the 90s. I was a bike messenger in San Francisco, and alley cats became really big, alley cat races towards the mid to late 90s. And riders would have these little laminated cards that would identify them from a number, and they kind of became their own weird, kind of thing on their own. Like if we had a union election, I'd make little, political spoke cards to try to get people to win. So I was like, well, what do I work with? The bike messenger community, which is this it definitely was, it is still now, but it definitely was very active in the 90s, where you had these racers. So people would travel, this international, interconnected community. And then I work with Cherokee language. So I was like, aha, well, I'll just, kind of obvious to me, let's combine these two passions. So at first I gave out these laminated cards with, you can see Cherokee images and words, the writing system and how it's pronounced, the transliteration, the Roman letters. And you can see, I hope you can see there's a little pipe there, and it's a play on Magritte. I'm a huge Magritte fan. I saw 6 exhibitions of Rene Magritte in 1 year. That was a lot of globetrotting to see that. But this is not a pipe in Cherokee. So there's all these kind of humor, and keeping things interesting is really important. But anyway, so these are different images. I sent them out to bike messengers, and they could, if they photographed the bike in their, the spoke card on their bike in their community and gave it back to me, then they could request a special word. So that was a challenge, how to illustrate these words, how to find the Cherokee words. So it was like this really active interplay. And one person requested magpie, and between my mother and I, we talked to 7 different speakers. I don't speak Cherokee. I can sort of butcher my way through, but it's pretty rough. But we spoke to fluent speakers, and people didn't know a word for magpie, which I'm surprised by, because we have a word Sonequa for pterodactyl, and that's an old word. And we have 2 different words for octopus, and we're mountain people. We're not coastal people. So I was really surprised. So it was Mooney Squirrel invented a word that was Uinijisqua, which was a chatty bird. And like many other indigenous languages in North America, all our words are very descriptive. So when you describe something, you kind of are naming it, you are creating the word. So I love the fact that I was in the Louvre parking lot and in Venice on a bicycle. But and here's some of the words. So, usually when you're first studying a native language, and I think things are getting a lot better, but you usually have a word list, and there'll be words like buffalo and wolf, and you're like, well, that's great, but that's not something maybe I discuss every day. So even typewriter's a little obsolete. Sock monkey was really fun to research, because we had to find out that how many socks do you use to make sock monkeys? That changes how it's described. So Dilio is using multiple socks. And Gadoogie down in the corner, that's one of the only words I can think of where there's not a quick English translation. And Gadoogie and many indigenous people have this idea of a communal work crew where you come together, there's a project, in this case, they're building a road. There's a project, you build the council house, everyone gets together, they work, then they disperse, and that's a Gadoogie. And these are some of the words. So part of the idea is, as an indigenous person, you can travel anywhere and your indigeneity doesn't fall off. You can never turn it off. I can never turn off being a Cherokee Nation tribal member, and other native artists, no matter how much education they get or where they travel or what they do in their life, they never stop being indigenous. And our languages and our cultures are large enough to embrace the entire universe. We have before European contact, and we continue to do so. And, our cultures are constantly evolving. From this, I really love the idea of public art interventions where you're not necessarily vandalizing anything, even though that definitely has its place in society too. So I like the idea of having public art, street art that's unsanctioned, but if people hate it, they can take it off. So I did plant tags, and Plants of the Allies is very something I think we can all understand and relate to. And I'll make the story very quick, but the Cherokee story is that animals were really sick of humans hunting them. So they all met in council, and they decided that for every single animal, they would create a disease, and that disease would affect humans. And the plants got wind of this plan by the animals, and the plants are like, well, we like the humans. So for every disease, we will create a cure. And, that definitely resonates, having gone through COVID, and that I still don't know what animal they pinned COVID-19 on, but yeah, so there's a lot of, all these are allegorical, but there's a lot of very concrete truth behind all these allegorical stories. And so these are the paintings, I'm a painter, so I'm like, oh no, how can you be a conceptual artist and be a painter? So taking these original paintings and making them into the plant tags. But this is an argument I have, and again, you'll see this reflected in the magazine constantly, of reminding myself, we always give other people the advice we need to take ourselves, but act, don't react. So that is a constant reminder to, come from your own power and not base your actions on what other people are doing, or, maybe what the colonial state is doing, but, come from your own power and your own truth, right? Constant challenge. And this was part of the Anarchist Book Fair art show I used to curate for several years with my dear departed friend, Damon Votor. He was a great help. But the Bay Area Anarchist Book Fair is like every April, and we'd do a show. So we would give it a name and a theme. And one of them was anti. And it's kind of gently teasing the anarchist community for, being so against everything that it's like, what are you for? And I do think it's true that the future belongs to those who envision it. So you can't create a future just by resisting and, being against. You have to really come up with your own vision. And back to the Cherokee language, Roy Boney, Joseph Erb, and Durbin Feeling, we've lost Durbin Feeling, but they all work together, and they're why we have the Cherokee language on all our smartphones. And before they did that, they would just create art about it. They would, paint on a gourd and, have this kind of pre-contact Mississippian figure talking on texting on a smartphone. And I just think that's such a great, wonderful example where, art is so diverse and so many different things, but it is also a place of imagination and dreaming. So you really could just, create the future you want in the art and then follow through with actions. So I just think that's a constant inspiration. And I'm glad this particular painting that I did ended up in a Caddo family, because it's a sunflower, and sunflower, I'm a nerd, if you haven't figured out. I'm semi-obsessed with early agriculture before we got maize from Mesoamerica. And the southeastern United States is one of, I believe it's 10 places in the entire world where agriculture was independently invented. And the first thing we did was gourds. That was the first plant we domesticated. Like I was there. But and a lot of these crops, now we don't use so much. I do. My backyard's full of them. They're called weeds, but they're really crops. But sunflower is one crop that's a early pre-contact Eastern woodlands crop. And the Caddo people, when they came from the underworld, they brought sunflower with them. So I'm glad that that's still part of our foodways today. So also being an artist, and I'm so relieved to find out that it's really common in the arts that everyone wears like 20 different hats. I thought it was like, oh my God. And if you want inspiration for people who do all the things, look to Greenlandic Inuit art, because they do everything. But curation is like, if you want to see the shows, sometimes you have to curate them. And I definitely, my curatorial practice is very humble and very community based and very like, where can we put art? So, I kind of see a problem. It's like, well, how can we solve this through art? How can we have a discussion? And I think in our world, definitely now, everything is so polarized, everything's so black and white, that I think imagery is a really good way to kind of tease out nuance, because we know the world is complex. We know it can be very ambiguous. We know it can be nuanced, and sometimes we don't want the answer, and art is so good for asking the questions and not necessarily having the answers. So I was a union organizer with the LW in the Bay Area, and I saw that they were against a proposition. It was Prop 1A at the time that was for native gaming, and I believe there's one that just happened in California for native gaming. And native gaming is also native sovereignty. People will attack gaming as a way to attack tribal sovereignty. So I was like, well, this isn't right. The tribes and the unions are ultimately for the same thing, which is sustainability and equity. So these groups need to work together. So out of pocket, when you don't know you can't do something, you just do it. So I self-funded as you can see, a 3-state traveling exhibition, and just got really into credit card debt is how I did it. But it started in San Francisco, where unions are really ubiquitous, and there is a large Native community in San Francisco, but it's not always visible, and it's not always connected. And the art scene, there used to be an amazing gallery, American Indian Contemporary Arts Gallery, and that was the best gallery I've ever seen in my life. But once they closed doors, with the .com boom, that center was never replaced. So yeah, so San Francisco unions, people get, Native community, not so much. And then it went to the Cherokee Reservation, Park Hill, and there natives, yes, we get natives. 10% of Oklahoma is enrolled in a federally recognized tribe. But unions are very exotic here. And then finally, it went to Michigan, perfect place, because Gun Lake Potawatomi were putting in a casino, and there was a lot of discussion about the jobs it would create. So that was the perfect, balance. And it's wonderful to see how these same artworks can change depending on their location and the audience. Venues, everything. So these are other, kind of more and playful shows that I curated, Lorez, and more recently, kind of more serious. And this is co-curation with Callie Chunistudi, but Earthshakers, the influence of Cherokee women. So I haven't been able to curate as much as I'd like, but that is something else I did. And I taught art history, as Lisa kindly explained, at the Institute of American Indian Arts, and I taught the early Native art history, so ancient times, 10,000 years ago to 1950. Or was it 1930? But anyway, everyone wants to teach the contemporary art, but I'm like, ooh, but I want to teach the early art, because I always argue no one is an expert in the field. Nobody is an expert in the field of Native art history, because there's so much that has completely not been studied, not been written about. Any direction you go, if you deviate from the main paths of what people have written about, there's fresh material, and it can be looked at in so many different fresh ways. So I think we're all complete beginners in this regard. And it's a great field. If you want to make an impact, consider Native art history as a field. But so painting is the venue I had. So I used the venue I had to, kind of discuss these early artists who to me are fascinating. So Moses Stranger Horse, he's sorry, I'm going to butcher that. Brûlé Lakota, sorry. And he, after this happened a lot in World War II. He did it in World War I, where he served in the US military. He was stationed in Europe. He stayed on. He stayed on in France because he wanted to study painting. And he did this. This wasn't a program by any kind of government. He had of his own initiative. He decided, and then he went back to his homelands and he painted these amazing landscapes. He was ambidextrous, so he's very theatrical in his presentation, but just kind of recuperating these fascinating histories that don't fit these, kind of very simplistic narratives we have of Native art history. And of course, one of my ultimate heroes is Ammonia Lewis. And I painted this and I put it in Indian Market, and there's all the writing because I'm like, how do I be more explicit? Let me really explain what this is. And then I found out they have found her grave, and she passed on in 1907. So that is owned by a museum, and I need to get in that museum and correct that date. But she's not only the first Native American artist that made it as a huge success in the international art world. She ended up having, in the 1870s, she had a studio that employed 9 full-time assistants in Rome, Italy. That was her dream, to be a marble sculptor in Rome, Italy, and she fulfilled her dream. She's also the first African-American artist. So the fact that she's first Native American and African-American and a woman on top of that to succeed, just a decade after the end of the Civil War is incredible. So hopefully you already know about Ammonia Lewis, but if not, there's more research and information coming out about her all the time. So teaching, not a great teacher. And people are like, no, you're great. And it's like, no, I hate being the authoritarian. I hate taking role. I hate doing grades. I hate it. So I'm just not a good teacher. So I was like, well, but I have this new passion of Native art history, because my mind, and I grew up in the Native art world. I was one of those kids dragged to all the art shows. Still, my mind would be blown every week. Just something, I'd learn something, and it still happens. I'll learn something, totally put me in a tailspin. You always have to maintain an open mind, that beginner's mind to, accept new knowledge, because there's, oh my God, there's so much to learn. So I launched a blog to try to train myself to write better. And it's still up, this relic from 10 years ago. And there's all this really interesting information that, it's not always spot on, but very interesting coming out of academia. But most people don't have the time to read these things, and most sane people don't, get up online and use Google Translate to read people's to read people's dissertations in Danish to find out what's going on. So I was like, okay, how do I break this down? And I do think that is still my role today. How do I break the ideas down? How do I make them accessible? If the artists and the collectors are not part of the conversation, it's not a conversation. All the components of the art world need to be on board. And, going to art school is kind of a luxury. It can be very expensive in time and money. So honestly, a lot of Native artists don't have art degrees. And it's like, and that's okay. But I'm like, okay, can I get what's useful and good from art school and make it available to Native artists? Can I make it available to the public? And then can I bring the collectors into the fold too? Because these are people that passionately love and support Native art, and often not just financially, but also with their time and sweat equity through volunteering at museums. So, definitely in my writing and with the magazine, we try to be very inclusive. And I think a lot of the time the art world and art writing is very much about gatekeeping, and people joke about international art speak, but it's real, it's still there. I'm like, oh my God. And I used to think it was a cop-out when people critique academic writing. I'm like, well, just toughen up. It's sophisticated. And it's like, no, this is redundant. It is so redundant. And there is discussion about that, how people take an essay, stretch it out to a book. Trees died for this book. So I'm always like, a tree is dying for my writing. Is it good enough? So continuing, I'm still fighting the same battles, and I have to keep a sense of humor about it. But, part of it is this, so many tropes that just won't budge. And I'm keep trying. I keep spitting in the ocean. But, the idea of traditional, I love editing because it's a game to me, how many traditionals I can eliminate. Because people overuse the word, they can't define it. It means different things to different people at different times. And it's really reserved for brown people. It's reserved when you look at this dichotomy, which is a false dichotomy of traditional and contemporary. It's reserved for Asian art, African art, Native American art, and Latin American art. Of course, huge overlap between Latin American and indigenous art, since so many countries like Bolivia have majority indigenous people. But so it's kind of playing games and kind of how do we tease this out? How do we think about this creatively? And if you don't get it from one angle, approach it from another angle. So, and I'm really excited because we are about to hit, next April will be our 10th anniversary, which for a magazine is incredible. The majority of magazines do not make it past the first year, and definitely not past the first 5 years. So the fact that we made it 10 years is pretty epic. But so I used to do zines. If you're in the punk scene and you have no musical talent and you let that hold you back, which many people don't, now they're fabulous bands. But you make zines. So I always made zines in school. And as a bike messenger, I did the bike messenger zines. And so it's interesting. Those same weird skills I still use today, which is basically kind of corralling, herding those cats, gently encouraging people to write, gently encouraging maybe deadlines. It's a week past deadline. Can we get our work in? But there's so many different reasons why we launched this magazine. And I definitely did it with a crew of people. And initially, most of the people involved were artists. So this is definitely led by Native artists. And we definitely very, very quickly had non-Native allies. But I think there's a lot going on. But part of this is, yes, we want the world to see Indigenous art, but we want it contextualized within Indigenous values. We want our values and our worldview to accompany the art. Because, for 500 years, non-Native people, European people have collected Native art. They're good at that. But do they also get the meaning and the ideas and the values that come with it? And then we really don't want to limit anything. If artists are making it, we want to showcase it. So broadest possible range of the tribes, the regions, the media, the times. I want to blow people's mind with every issue, just like my mind keeps getting blown. And then also that freedom to stop starting at square one, because a lot of, in the art world, you were expected to know who people are. If I was like, who's Ai Weiwei? I would be laughed out of the room. You really are expected to do your homework. But somehow for Native art, people will kind of, and I've seen it where people kind of use their ignorance as like a badge, like, oh yes, I don't know that much, or I'm new to this. And for a while, thank God this trend's gone, but and I read reviews of Native art shows all the time. There was this trend of like, well, you probably don't know, or you probably expect this, and why are you insulting your reader? So I don't insult my readers. I expect them to be intelligent adults, and maybe if they don't know, I'll explain it to them. But we will move. We're going to move beyond Indian 101. We're going to talk about the actual art in front of our face, not like try to bring you up to speed on everything. You need to come to the table with a little information. So yes, so we do use art terminology because, it is useful, but we try to explain it. Because I want the reader to be intelligent, but I don't expect the reader to have an MFA in art or a PhD in art history. We're not just writing for ourselves. And yeah, that's always a joke, not the same 6 artists. And this is the mainstream art world too, where someone gets famous, celebrity, they get written about. So other people are like, well, we got to write about them too, or we have to have this person to show. And I think non-native institutions with natives, it's like, we're not the Highlander. There can be more than one, that there's so many unbelievable on the ground. You see so many unbelievable, talented artists from so many different regions that, there can't be one person to speak for all of us. So I think our duty is constantly to show the interesting new talent that's happening out there. And, we're kind of the flux, the chaos that the academics can then, they can pull from the chaos that we're bringing up and, refine and always let the artists' voices shine through. Yeah, a lot of the people involved early on, I've been interviewed and misquoted and facts are wrong. And you're like, no. And I've even had, I will email, answers to interviews. Most of the time I trust you if I'm talking to you on the phone, but even that'll get rewritten. So it's like, we do fact check. Novel idea, but we do. And then our format is really clean white art magazine, really like sans serif fonts for the headlines, art magazine, but then the art is what makes it different, is not the format making it different. So art and visual art, and I've broadened that out. Originally I was visual art, but now it's like, yes, film, literature, all that poetry, we need it all, theater, we need to expand it because these are all ways of conveying emotion and ideas, one human being to the other. And then Indigenous peoples in Americas, you don't think that would be confusing, and yet it is. That's why I have this same hemispheric map on the website, because people will be like, well, do you cover Sami people? And I think Sami people are awesome. I'm majority Swedish. My heritage is Swedish, but so yeah, of course I find Sami people really fascinating, but we don't write about them that much. Occasionally they can bring in. So we are the Americas, North and South America. And it's interesting because the political outline of the United States doesn't conform to the Americas because the United States controls islands such as Hawaii that we have no business controlling, and American Samoa and Guam, and these are Indigenous people that live there, but they are Polynesian. So definitely, absolutely support them in solidarity. But our scope is the Americas because before there was European contact, that people traveled up and down, maybe not so much, but the same culture span Panama as they do Colombia. So all these divisions, people do say I didn't cross the border crossed me. And that's absolutely true. And that goes for all these borders up and down. So yeah, I think we kind of covered this, what people didn't want. And it was interesting because initially we were set in Santa Fe, Santa Fe's our New York, but Native artists, Native cultures, very much the definition of Indigenous is your connection to the land. So I think after postmodernism, there's more than one geographical center for the art world, right? Yes, London and New York do not speak for all of us, even though they're important intersections. But so a lot of really important Native artists will be in very remote regional areas because their connection to their tribe is so important. And James Luna is a prime example of that. He lived on the La Jolla Reservation. Today, Joe Feddersen, one of the most important living Native artists, he lives in Omak, Washington. So our idea of cultural centers is very different, I think, than outsiders use of cultural centers in the art world, that maybe the urban center is not the center for the culture. So even though we were based in Santa Fe, we really wanted to expand everyone. So that first issue, sorry, lots of back and forth. That first issue I wrote about contemporary Greenlandic art because I think politically Greenland was colonized by Denmark, so it's separated by that. But geographically, it is North America. And then the heritage is that it's the same in today. Historically, not so much, but today the Inuit people of Greenland are the exact same as their neighbors in Canada. And there was still free flowing immigration, into the 19th century between Canada and Greenland. So yeah, kind of rekindling these connections. Our first pilot issue, which I named Zero, because comic books do that, and I'll be like, well, I'm honoring Mesoamerican people for inventing zero. And really, I was concerned that it was maybe so terrible we'd be embarrassed by it and be like, oh, and I think it's fine. I stand by it. It's available online for free if you want to read it. But the first idea was that it would only have Indigenous writers. And I was like, I'm thoroughly impressed by the people that took a risk and were willing to write for this magazine. And many of them are still involved. They're all leaders. They're absolutely all leaders in their fields. But yeah, it's not tenable. In Canada, 5% are Indigenous and 95% are non-Indigenous. In the United States, 2% are Indigenous to the United States. 98 are not Indigenous to the United States. And it is interesting, that's a whole nother conversation, where many people are Indigenous to the Americas, but not necessarily to the United States. And that's not to say they're not Indigenous peoples. But so yeah, if you're that small of a group of people, you need allies, and that's the reality. And we also want those different perspectives, because people from different communities feel more comfortable discussing different topics. So I'm really proud and really happy that we've had Indigenous people from outside the Americas write for us. We've had African-American writers, we've had European writers. So I'm really grateful for that. And I want as much diversity as we can have. And early on, this doesn't seem shocking if you guys are from the art world, but it was kind of shocking for Native art, is that we had reviews of shows that had already happened. And it's like, okay, that seems like a no-brainer to the art world, but to Native art world, especially in Santa Fe, there is a wealth of art writing. It isn't necessarily good. A lot of it's like throwaway freebie magazines or freebie newspapers that are geared toward tourists, and they're the writers, having been one of these writers, I can say they're not well paid, and there's not a lot of expectations of quality discussion. So everything's marketing. Everything is marketing. So every artist is a master artist, and we're constantly in a renaissance, and it's like that seems very hollow very quickly after you read a few of these. You're like, oh my God, it's all fluff and you just don't trust it. So we don't tend to trash shows. It's a really big deal if we write a bad review. Usually if a show's shoddy and they didn't put the work in, we're like, well, Tree died for this. We're not going to give them space. But yeah, the fact that we will go back and try to analyze, and I think the writer's qualitative response is important, but also contextualization is part of, I think sometimes it's not like, it's not like a movie review or pizza review. Like, I give this show 4 out of 5 stars, like explaining who the person is, how do they fit into the scene, how do they fit into the greater art world, who are they in dialogue with. There's so much to reviews, fleshing out. But it isn't marketing, and that's hard. Like, marketing and critique, totally different. And we really take pride in separating as much as humanly possible the editorial content from the advertising. And I hate that that's rare in an art magazine, but unfortunately it is. So I try to do the best I can with that level of integrity. And online, the website, and we'll revisit it many times, but I try to provide information that the community needs. So the calendar takes an unbelievable amount of work. But there's an online calendar that's accessible. And of course, it's not, we cover all regions. So you pretty much have to use a search function to find out anything in your area. And then we put that into the actual magazine because any archivist will tell you that it's important to have things online, but it's also important to have it in writing, that hard copy archive is important. So when you go back, there's a record of what shows were happening during this time period. So I hope the printed version is a good resource, even though it's almost very quickly obsolete. I hope it's a good resource when people are looking back towards these times. You know, what were the trends? Who are the players? And then in the interest of kind of no shame information, that we try to explain art terms. So some of these come from, kind of Western art terms. Some of these are native specific, but just like break down, like, what are people talking about? Because I want people to know. If you're curious, I want to have an answer for you. And some things cannot be discussed if they're very culturally specific, if they're religious, or maybe, and it's really hard, but if you're being honest, some things we don't know an answer to. So, anyone is welcome to go to our social media and ask a question. If you want something, challenge us, if you want something explained, or you can send a private email and we'll try to get back to you. And if we don't know, we'll answer. But usually if I don't know, I can find someone who does know. So these are some of the projects. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, how did I do? As a side project, a couple of years, we did the preview magazine for the Hurd Fair, which is the second largest Native American art event in the United States, at the Hurd Museum in Phoenix, Arizona. So those are both online for free, and they have completely distinct articles from the magazine itself. And this is just how we try to challenge people's views, not by butting up against stereotypes, but just reflecting the reality on the ground, so that there's so much diversity in the Indigenous art world. And you can see in the corner that portrait of the young girl. She has a mola. So I'm really happy that we could cover a Guna artist from Panama. That was Peter Zox. He found us and he hasn't written for us. Come back, Peter, I miss you. But his writing was so good and just really thorough, and I really appreciate him. And there he also wrote about Garifuna painting, that is Afro-Indigenous people that span many countries like Belize, Honduras, Guatemala. I think it's so important to have this conversation. And sometimes I think people just want to focus on what they know, and there's a lot of discussion only of Canada and the United States, and that is absolutely because of Anglophone bias. So I think it's very important for us to define ourselves by who we are and not by who colonized us. Yes, we were colonized. Yes, we went through this experience about colonization, but that might have the borders separating us and the language separating us. How do we overcome those separations and get back to who we are and who our origins are as people? Social media, our Facebook's very, very active. So if you do have questions, like, please initiate a discussion on Facebook, or Instagram, you can initiate a discussion. It's a little less dialogue friendly. You can't share as much, but we do have an active Instagram. And I try to promote this meme of the blue deer. And of course, the blue deer Bambi art, if you know 20th century American Indian painting, the blue deer was widely used, and it is actually from Huichol religion, peyote religion. The blue deer is the elder brother of humanity that looks over us. So all these artists that were playing blue deer, they weren't riffing off Disney. Disney was riffing off them. And it was actually very important because they were letting people know that they were members of the Native American church and the peyote religion that comes from Western Mexico. So just humor, that's our meme. So I was into Surrealist Turquoise when it was underground, and I'm not around artists enough. I am around more curators and art historians, but I need to be around more artists to keep these jokes going. And for every single issue early on, we would have a launch party, which now I think is insane. But when I moved, and it was a big shift. I moved back to Oklahoma, where I grew up, from Santa Fe. And I'm like, oh, why did I do that? But Santa Fe can be very small, and Oklahoma, we don't have a centralized art scene. We, especially here in Norman, there's nowhere you can really walk one place to the other. We have a downtown, but it's a couple of blocks. So you put in those miles driving. Oklahoma is a huge state. Every tribal community has its own kind of art scene. The different regions in the state are very different, but it's like, okay. we're growing, we're changing, we're reflecting new realities, and different tribes are opening new cultural centers constantly. So it is happening now. But anyway, again, the humor. This is the first launch party I had when I moved to Oklahoma. And that year of 2017, we took a different tact, which I think was very important, but kind of painful process. Which James Luna, who he's departed, I have great respect for him. He called me up and he's like, we have to talk about Jimmy Durham, because he had this huge retrospective, this multi-million-dollar retrospective that started in the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles and went up to the Remain Modern in Saskatchewan. Massive solo exhibition, the likes that actual Native people don't get. I'd like to see them get it, but not yet. And I was like, no, our focus is Indigenous artists. Jimmy Durham is not Indigenous. He's outside our purview. And then a couple hours later, Nancy Mithlow, Cherokee, brilliant Cherokee writer, educator, art historian, anthropologist, she called and she's like, we have to talk about Durham. And I was still like, no. And then I thought about it and I'm like, yes, they are right. I didn't want to, it's very distasteful, but I was like, yeah, we need to address this person. Because as a Cherokee person, and every Cherokee person is used to the reality that people claim our identity. We are outnumbered, as many of us, and there's no shortage of Cherokee people, actual Cherokee people, but there's far more people that claim us with no connection to the tribe. And that is different. I'm really glad Kim Tallbeard talks about this a lot. That is absolutely different than someone who is related and can enroll. And the Eastern Band does have a blood quantum. Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, they have a blood quantum. So there are people that are culturally engaged, and their parents, their grandparents are enrolled members, but they are not. So the reality of descendancy is, it is real and it is different than someone who's just a fraud. And Jimmy Durham is a fraud. So if you don't know him, you can look him up. He's very provocative sculptor. And he represented Native people so many times. He was the placeholder for non-Native people. They just loved him, and they love him in Canada, and they loved him in Europe. And he left the United States when the Indian Arts and Crafts Law passed in 1990. And that was championed by Native people. Native artists really fought for that law to be passed. Non-Native people don't care. They do not care. So it's up to us Native people to try to convince non-Native people that it matters if a Native artist is who they say they are, because they're speaking on our behalf. Richard Ray Whitman, a Yuchi Muskogee artist who's also now an actor. He's getting famous. He's in Reservation Dogs. I love, years ago, he said, essentially, artists are our ambassadors, and they truly are. Visual art has been, with all the cultural suppression, visual art has been one venue open to Native peoples the entire time. We were always allowed to make our art. So that was kind of how we conveyed ourselves to the outside world. So for a non-Native person to take that space and speak on our behalf it's not just an annoyance, it is the ultimate end game of colonialism, where non-Native people are taking our identity. And people are like, well, it'll work itself out. It's been multi-generations were trying to explain that this person wasn't Native. And so it was the Summer of Durham. So we published this article, and now it became this whole very concerted effort by a number of people in multiple countries, Native people, and some people have been fighting this fight for 40 years, but finally the art world, not uniformly, but the art world began to finally admit, like, oh, we made a mistake, this person's not Native. And I was amazed that the responses back were not logic-based. They weren't fact-based. No one gave me a fact for why Jimmy Durham was Native. They're just like, well, you're wrong because of this, this, this. And it was like every logical fallacy you could think of, like making fun of us, just saying we're crazy, we're too dumb to get his art. It's like, I'm not talking about his art. I never talked about his art. So that, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But unfortunately, the reality is that we're in a boom time, and it's spoken about much more in Canada, that the art world has discovered Indigenous art. I don't know how long this will last, but unfortunately, non-Native people are seizing spaces and opportunities and money. People are like, why would anyone do that? Money, power, jobs, a voice, getting to be self-righteous, and what's more troubling to me than the individuals doing it, are the tribes. There are so many tribes that are completely unsanctioned. They're not recognized. And, you know, people will be like, well, why do I need the government to recognize? Well, do other tribes recognize you? Do the existing tribes recognize you? So I know this is a big problem in Massachusetts where you're at. It's up and down the coast. Every historic tribe has a group that is claiming to be it, and extends into Texas. And I'm shocked, like Texas, there's so many Native people, but unfortunately there's also many more you know, fraudulent tribes. But anyway, enough of that. So one good thing is with the magazine, we've been able to have symposiums. So I was able, oh my God, that's pixelated, but I was able to have through NSU all-day symposium of Cherokee art history, which is really one of the most wonderful events I've ever been part of. And I think it's fascinating. We're the largest tribe. We do have more books on Cherokee art history, but really it's the artists ourselves are the only ones driving the research, the care. Like I learned so much about Cherokee art history from other artists who maybe don't have art history degrees. And there aren't enough people in the field that we just can't wait for, you know, the professionals, the art historians to come and write a book about us, that we really have to drive the discourse ourselves. And then Jeannie Mertz Edwards, a writer from Kansas, she's also an adjunct professor. She and I and a team of us worked together to create this really wonderful multi-day event in Lynchburg, Kansas, which is known as Little Sweden. So if we can create an Indigenous art event in Little Sweden, in Lynchburg, Kansas, we can do it anywhere. And it kind of seemed like, you know, kind of crazy, but it was also really wonderful and profound to bring together all these artists that had connections to this region that kind of doesn't identify itself as being a native region. But of course, if you are in the Americas, you are on native land. So we were able to point out different archaeological sites in their town that they didn't know about, where Wichita people had interacted with the Spanish. And there were really touching stories where a lot of the tribes that were from that region had been forcibly removed in Oklahoma. And when people do land acknowledgements, you know, especially like New York, they're like, oh yes, we're the home of the Lenape people. We got your tribes. Like the conversation of forced removal always has to take place in the United States because so many tribes were forced from their homelands. So they're still alive and doing great. They're just not in their traditional homelands. Yeah, so during the pandemic, it was really hard. We did different things. So we did make one of our issues available for free online, and kind of what can we do online? During the pandemic, we were able to, because we're dispersed, our writers have to be everywhere to be able to review a show, you know, they have to be there. So we do have a very dispersed community of writers and editors, but we all work online. So we're kind of made for the pandemic, where we were able just to fly into action. And I don't know a single person in my immediate circle that like had time to waste and wasn't working. We're all working like double shifts. Like, what can we do? So one thing, and it's an obvious idea, but we moved very quickly on it, was to have an online virtual exhibition of masks, because people were making masks, and we just moved more quickly than anyone else of having an Indigenous mask. And it was great because, and this webinar proves this point, because oh God, I was supposed to go 45 minutes. Sorry, I'll move quicker. But it melted geographical barriers. So it was great. We had people from the Yukon, from interior of Alaska, artists I'd never heard of before. So excited to participate with them. And we were able to put that into Stacy Pratt, who's a writer for us. She was like, we have to discuss the pandemic. So we did have an issue 27, that addresses artists' responses to the pandemic. And at the time I was like, no, I'm sick of hearing about the damn pandemic. But now this record of this time that's in paper, it's online too, but it's in paper. I think it's so important what the artists did. And, you know, during this time period, we were able to partner with the Ralph D. Coe Center, and do Collection Spotlight, where we invite artists to discuss art pieces in their collection, because I think people don't appreciate enough how much knowledge is with the artists. Most of us have oral tribes, you know, oral discussions, so it's not written down. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, that the human beings are still the repository for most of the knowledge. Yeah, we had We Are Words for Art, all these discussions, and this sold out. Our webinar sold out, which shocked me. I did not anticipate that, but it was specifically about writing for Indigenous peoples of the Americas, about the art writing. So that there was so much interest really blew my mind. But these videos are all available to the public, and we just had one where we kind of, it's a little nerve-wracking because none of us are experts, but to say that we actually have learned something. So at Native Art Week this year, we all the different writers for different magazines, we actually were all friends, and or at least colleagues that work together. So I was really happy the central woman is from Native Max magazine, a fashion magazine. So we kind of asserted like, okay, we're going to discuss the trends happening in contemporary art, because even though we're lowly writers, we're paying attention. We're on the streets finding out what's going on. And I'm really grateful that we are about to celebrate our 10th anniversary, like I said. So we do have active social media, and we have a website that tries to provide readily available information to the public. So I'll stop sharing, or maybe I'll keep sharing. What do you guys prefer? And we can go to questions.
I think we should go to questions.
Yes. Yeah.
Honestly, I have so many questions. I don't know what everybody else is.
Let's do it. Let's stop the sharing. Okay.
All right. You're not still sharing. You're good.
Okay, good. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Okay. There's so much.
All right.
There's so much. So we first met when you came to the University of Arizona Museum of Art.
That was a long time ago. Wow.
Yes, to participate in a project that was called Art is Work, where a studio for printmaking within a gallery that was devoted to the WPA project. So that is a long time ago now.
Yes. But I love it, the labor and art intersection.
Yes, I don't think the museum director loved that project.
Oh, I loved it.
but I really loved that project because I wanted to see what it meant to think about labor, to think about art making as labor, but also to recognize that the WPA was the only time when men and women artists in the country were paid the same.
Yeah,
that remains true. And it was those programs were unusually open, unusually diverse.
Yes, and a great boon for Native people.
Yeah, and really that was very interesting to me. Not that anyone's reproduced that, but still, okay.
It happened.
So I wonder, that means that's a long time ago now, 2005. What do you see as hotspots for Native American artistic communities?
Oh my God. Well, that's the thing is like, and I hope we reflect that things are always happening. They're always happening, but it's like, sometimes the outside world pays attention, sometimes not, but,
yes.
Yeah. Wow. Well, my understanding is, Zuni Pueblo, that 77%, this is from the Keishi Foundation, but 77% of that community depends on art for their primary or secondary income. So it's like, basically, they're the largest pueblo in New Mexico. So there's about 11,000 people, and obviously actually, children do end up doing a lot of art. So, I mean, there is just kind of an example about how community is just like, it is a hub.
Right.
But oh my God, like if I left any out, that would be very insulting. But
no, I didn't mean.
You're like, don't name all 600 First Nations in Canada. But a lot of really amazing things are happening where none of it, I think, is last year or in the last 2 years, none of it is it Kingiat? They got their first cultural center. So all the regions of all the provinces of Canada have a cultural center, and we all get to see what they're doing, and it's an amazing hub. But the fact that none of it got a cultural center as a territory is really amazing. And that community up there, they would say that they had the most artists per capita, and I'm like, I don't know. But then Pine Ridge also, a majority of the art people in Pine Ridge depend on art. So I mean, sorry, there's so many. Like wherever there's
super interesting. I'm not sure that people who are exclusively focused on like New York, right?
Yeah,
would know to look in different places. I mean, that's clearly a failing of the bi-coastal sort of art market situation, and always has been.
Yes,
but it makes me wonder, like the Canadian model in terms of the relationship between artists and museums or artists and galleries
Yes.
has seemed much more progressive to me than the lower states model.
Well, I'll always fight that, but it's like, yeah, they're different because Canada funds its art.
Right.
Canada funds its education. I am so jealous of the excellent, superb education that Canadians get, but I'm like, I'm gonna try, even though I'm in a state with like number 50. I think I'm heartbroken that honestly a lot of states where we just had the election, but a lot of states where there's a major concentration of Native people, unfortunately, have terrible state governments and woefully underfunded education systems, and there isn't that state funding for art. So I'm very envious, and I've been to some of the Canadian provincial museums, and they're huge and gorgeous, and I love how they will travel exhibitions. So they'll move, because I mean, you know, this is all inspired by the video by Lisa Rihanna. And it's like, I was looking at the videos and it's like, oh my God, I want to see it in real life, because seeing it in real life, being immersed and seeing the real art is so important. But a lot of Canadian artists do come down to the States because we have the market.
Right.
So a lot of people, a lot of First Nations people will participate in Indian market. And now I think the herd, they can do that too, because we have collectors and we have a really robust market that maybe they don't have in Canada. We do not have an Indigenous biennial in the United States. Montreal Art Mirror has oh my God, BACA. What does it stand for? They always give their name in French and I don't pronounce.
Oh, I don't know.
I can't speak French. But it's a contemporary Native, it's a contemporary Native biennial, art biennial. And then down in Quito, Ecuador, they're kicking our butts because they've had the BIAI. But anyway, it's the biennial Arte Indigena, save me Spanish speakers. And they've been going since, I believe, 2006. So they're really long standing and they've grown. They've moved to, they're still in Quito, Ecuador every other year, but they're also in Lima, Peru. And now they have two kind of satellite shows in the United States. So I'm like, oh my God, United States, we need to be part of the international art fairs. I feel like every other country except us is really integrated. Native peoples are integrated into the art fair circuit.
Well, you can see, I mean, you can see some movement, right? Like I was.
Oh yeah, things are happening so quickly.
Right, at the Art Gallery of Ontario, where Wanda Nanabush is the curator, and where the labels are Anishinaabe and French and English, which is amazing, right?
Yes.
Because if anybody's concerned about who's still with us, who's still living, who's still idle, right?
You see it.
Right
there.
I think, you know, American museums have been really slow by comparison. I mean, you know, the Canadian government's not that great in relationship to its Indigenous population, so I'm not feeling its virtue.
Either or. I think we have more. I think tribes have more political power here, but maybe it's because I'm in Oklahoma where we really have political power.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because you can't really divorce those things, but but I have looked as a curator, right? Looked to Canadian museums that seemed so much more progressive and inclusive and honoring than American counterparts.
And then when you talk about art museums, you always have to include tribal museums. I'm like, tribal museums are doing great.
Right.
I think that's one of the, you know, where we kind of have to fight maybe presuppositions of the mainstream art world that would always center, you know, cities as being most important. But a lot of these small museums really merit following because a lot of things are already a given, right? Indigenous futurism, for instance, it came from tribal communities. The Indian Pueblo Cultural Center in Albuquerque years ago had a show called Where's My Flying Car? And it was inviting Pueblo artists to envision the future. And Indigenous futurism was also happening in, I gotta brag again on Cherokees, in Park Hill. And they wanted to have an exhibition about it before it was even kind of coined as a term, indigenous futurisms, because it was already a given. All the native stuff is already given. Like, we know what native people are, we know what we're doing, we hear our language spoken, but we want to, look beyond and look to the future. And I know the Maka Museum has been the Maka Cultural Center has been really important for using native language, not just on the labels, but how they organize their collections, where, each language has its own ways of organizing things, categories and classifications. So it's really intriguing when you start organizing the art in that same manner. Wow. So I definitely think tribal museums are always, underfunded, almost always underfunded and understaffed, but they're really doing amazing, innovative things, and they're part of our United States too.
I have to tell you that, I'm a longtime subscriber to your magazine. And I love it, and I look forward to it. And I learn something, more than something. I learn a lot every time I read it. So I want to do, as you say, maintain the beginner's mind. That's like a koan, right? Like a daily.
Yeah. Yes.
How do you think that people who are on this webinar or who will see it on YouTube, I mean, the millions of people who will see it on YouTube, how could they support the magazine?
Yeah, so we're a magazine. Please subscribe. And then there is digital formats and there's print formats. So either one, on our website, you can just go and there's subscribe through PayPal, or you can subscribe digitally through Jumag. But also we try to provide a lot of free content, which you're welcome to share and use. And we really want to facilitate educators. So if you want to use a particular article for your classroom, email us. We'll try to work with you, because we want to amplify our writers' voices too. And I learned something every issue too. And again, I grew up I eat, drink, and breathe native art, and I still am constantly learning. And part of that is because the writers come from such diverse backgrounds, and I want people to write about what they're passionate about. So I'm very seldomly assigning stories. It's usually the writers are coming to me with what they really care about and what's really important. So I think we're very organic about reflecting what's on the ground.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, so I didn't really think tattoos would be so important. That wasn't on my mind, but it was definitely on other people's minds. So we've covered tattoos and comics, that these have been really important to people on the ground. But
it's funny, I started when I was in grad school, I worked for a zine that was called Your Flesh, which was
oh my God, I know that one.
Punk rock, punk rock.
Yes, excellent.
And
there's very few Gen Zers around.
I know. I like anybody out there. I don't know. What I loved about that was this confluence of influences, right? Like you have this deadline. You had to work to fill the pages with the kind of energy that you want to just get out there into the world. Which is really good training for curatorial work, turns out.
Yes. Because at first it's chaos and you're like, I can do a little bit better than this. I can make this kind of readable.
But I really, I appreciate what you're doing so much. I was hoping that we would have some questions here, and I'm not sure if we do. Let's see, we've got 3 messages.
Yay. And I'll also say we totally work with freelancers, and again, I want diversity, and I'm always looking for people to cover Latin American topics.
That would be great.
So and we pay. I'm not like rolling in the cash, but we do pay writers, so we're better than HuffPo.
Hey, let's turn to something you were talking about Jimmy Durham.
Sure.
Such a problem. He's not the only one. Right?
No, not at all.
Pretendian.
Yes. And that term is slaying. I'm like, we have to be mature adults.
I know we do. But
no. It's the common term.
It's a really terrible, weird mimicry that I don't understand. And I do understand the market piece, right? I understand the way that the market mechanism functions. What I don't understand is the personal impulse to capitalize on other people's cultural backgrounds and values. Do you have any thoughts about that since you ran this?
Yeah. And I always try to, because some people find this conversation really unpleasant and like,
I'm sorry.
I don't wanna, no, I don't.
Okay.
It's just part of my daily reality. My friend and I are like, we want to cancel our Fart of the Day Club subscription, because it's constant. But so I'm totally comfortable with the conversation. Because we have to model just being calm and just being fact-based and not letting it spiral out of control, or also take all the air out of the room too. But it is definitely happening, and it has happened, and it's not rare, and it isn't unique to Native Americans either, because indigenous peoples in the Americas, because in the Black community and in the Latin American community and even the Asian art community, this also happens. So it's so bizarre, but I really hope psychologists look into this. I think Rachel Dolezal is kind of the one where people like, something is wrong with you, but it's kind of the same thread you see with Ward Churchill, and it's kind of the same thread you see with Jimmy Durham, where they're obsessed with the idea of victimization. And I had a weird experience, but it was a very awakening experience of going from pretty much, maybe not majority Native, but very strong Native school in second and third grade, Muskogee, Oklahoma, to an all-Black Catholic school, and I was the only non-Black person there, so that kind of educated me about race as a kid. But our teacher who was not Black, she was a Dutch American, and she would really she would talk about how rough it was being Dutch and how awful the Nazis were the Dutch, which of course, yes, and she would really encourage the students to kind of share a litany of grievances. And I was like, I was a kid, but I was like, this isn't healthy. And I was kind of about some aspects about our history, because to me, I was like, Native people, the awesomest. Everyone wants to be Native. We're the greatest. I didn't realize, genocide, I was a kid. Right. And I knew Trail of Tears happened, but I was like, well, that happened. We're still the awesomest people. We're doing great. So this idea of victimization, I think, is so crazy. And these people are obsessed with victimization. And this idea of like somehow moral righteousness, and you're not morally right because you're one type of person or the other. Like all human beings are human beings. Like no one's morally superior by default. No. So I think those are really problematic trends. And they're also not very engaged with anything that's happened recently. That's why I love OCO TV, because it's talking about, people today, and, maybe they're a computer engineer, but it's like, they're still doing good things. They're still benefiting, so this obsession with hundreds of years ago and no engagement with anything that's happened recently, I think is a kind of a disturbing trend. But I really hope psychologists look into this. There is a sociologist that has looked at Cherokee fake tribes. There's more than and using the word tribe. Yep. I love writing because I can edit myself when I'm speaking. I speak off the cuff. But, so these are fraudulent organizations. Some people call them CPAINs, corporations, posing as American Indian nations. That there are at least 400 faux Cherokee groups. And so that is, oh my God, I can't think of the name of it right now. It'll come to me, but there is a book out there that is, it's becoming Cherokee, I think, or becoming Indian. And it's exclusively about the tribes, the faux groups. And I should always put this caveat in. California is a totally different conversation because there are completely, all the history's down, but the United States wrote but did not ratify many treaties with the tribes. So they are not federally recognized, but they are widely accepted and acknowledged as Native people. So California is a unique conversation. Sorry, I always have to put that caveat in.
No, that's good. That's good. So we have a question. Let's see. And I think this is about you and the magazine.
Okay, sure.
How broadly do you define art? Is it by media, by function, by aesthetic? For example, are baskets artworks?
Oh my God, yes. I'm in Oklahoma. Like there's none in reaching distance, but I'm surrounded by baskets. But sorry, what was the rest of the
question, I think.
Yeah, but anyway. Oh, no. Okay, that was it. Well,
Yep.
it's funny because I was thinking the other day, I'm like, didn't we fight a war about this? And I realized, like, oh my God, I think of postmodernism as a war. But
Yes.
to me, I'm like, postmodernism settled this question. And I think a lot of postmodernism happened because of feminist art movement, and the feminist art movement, the suffragists in the United States were informed directly by Seneca women. So there's definitely a native influence with feminism, but the idea that declaring some things fine art, and I really try to avoid use the word fine art, that is very classist, it's very sexist, it's very racist. It comes out of particular threads of philosophy, Enlightenment thought philosophy from Northern Europe, that excludes the majority of the planet. Like, oh, well, this person who's been sanctioned and has a stamp of approval and is doing the proper, sculptor, and they went to the right academy, they are fine art. And these other people, they're making craft. So I love the fact 20 years ago when I was in grad school, craft was the forbidden word.
Right.
Now it's come full circle where craft is very much embraced.
Definitely.
But this hands-on making that we live in such a manufactured world that hands-on making is increasingly valued. But absolutely, you can use anything as art. Any material, and I actually have an art piece that I wish I could pull up, but that's talking about that. But this idea that it's utilitarian, therefore it cannot be art. This art for art's sake, and I wrote a little blog piece about it, definitely comes from Immanuel Kant. It comes from Enlightenment thinking. It's very specific groups within Northern Europe during a very specific group of time, and even John Dewey, the American. What was his philosophical view? Pragmatism, I think it was. But anyway, he was trying to dismantle that as early as the 1930s and kind of take the everyday back into the art world, take it off its pedestal, and bring it back into the world. So absolutely. And the thing is, and this is something we're only teasing out now, but the idea of a basket, those designs for many cultures have very specific names. The materials, the gathering of the materials is very valued, the dyes, the colors. So there is meaning throughout the entire process, the materials. And the person who's written the most clearest, shortest article that I used to give this out like Chicks Tracks, but and I've written about a bunch, but Heather Ahtone, so that's Ahtone, she wrote an essay called Design to Last, and it's fantastic. And it doesn't work just for native art. It works for, I think you could apply it to any art there is, but she gives you 5 lenses to work through. I used to have a little post on my computer, what those 5 lenses are, but what time period is the art working in? How do they address time? How do they address others? So that's not just people, but also animals, plants, the cosmos, the land. What are the materials and processes? And I think now, we definitely see that materials and processes is very important. It's not just the end result of what it looks like, that's just, the tip of the iceberg. And then also, kind of what is the symbolism? And I do think, and I could always be proven wrong, but I do think there has never been a Native American minimalist. So I'm going on a ledge, making a very bold claim, because minimalism as an art form, it is what it is. It is not supposed to reference anything else. Like, you look at a minimalist piece of art, what you take in through your senses is it. It's all about the surface. It's about the immediate senses. But even very, and there is stripped down forms, like Alan Hauser has very, very stripped down forms that are extremely abstracted, but they still reference the human form or materiality.
But I think Diane Whitehawk, what about her?
Who?
Diane Whitehawk, right?
And Diane Whitehawk. Yeah, there's so many layers because she's referencing quill work and beadwork.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
She seems to me to make minimalism better.
But she's not a minimalist because she's referencing things. She's, there's this whole weight of quill work. And there's sorry, I can go off on a million tangents, but just quickly, quill work. There's kind of this lie that quill work is obsolete and it's a dying art form. And it was replaced by beadwork, but quill work, porcupine quills, the other places have porcupines, but only North America has quill work. It always existed concurrently with beadwork. They relate to each other, but quill work was never replaced. And if you get on Instagram and punch in hashtag quill work, we're in a golden era of quill work. There's the most beautiful, amazing quill work, and you can even collect it and wear quill work earrings. But anyway.
I can't thank you enough for this evening. I hope we get to work together again. It would be really
okay,
good.
sure, always, yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Rochelle Pablo asked when I'll be in New Mexico, and they'll be February because I'll be working at 4116 Contemporary, where she is the curator.
Oh, great. Okay, I see.
And the blog is still up there. Defining art. Oh my God. So the constant phrase we use is we have words for art, because there's a saying that's not true that native languages, and some native languages might not. So our word for art in Cherokee is ditilostody. And part of it is repeatedly making a small mark. So repeated mark making. So that's one view of art. And another view of art, that Cherokee view of art, that comes from Dennis Sixkiller, and I think it's very profound. Creator make creation, and humans can only make echoes of creation. So if it's nature, it's created by creator, but if it's an echo of creation, then it's human. But anyway.
That's beautiful.
So sorry, were you trying to wrap it up?
I think I am. I think
okay, I will let you continue without more interruptions.
No. I really appreciate you, and
yes, thank you,
sharing
Lisa.
sharing your work and your thinking and your magazine with us this evening. As I said before, this will be on YouTube sometime soon for everyone, and we'll send the link so we can all share.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. This is really
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Cheers.
All right, cheers.